This is the Analysing Anfield podcast on the Blood Red channel, bringing you the best tactical and statistical analysis of Liverpool FC.
Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm Josh Williams and I'm joined as ever by David Hughes. Dave, how are you getting on?
Very good, thank you, Josh. Very good.
And how is the wig?
Yeah, I was just telling you before we come on, didn't I, that Sarah, my fiance, she had to go with a cutting it, and she did an alright job until she got to the sideburns, and then she's gone well too high. No, she's gone too brave with the clippers, and she's took well too much off. So yeah, we had a little bit of a barney over that, and then but to be fair, look, it looks better, and you know we're getting a little bit closer. So hopefully that'll see me through now until everything opens up again, which is on the horizon. I see you're still battling on, yeah.
I'm hanging on till the end, but mine's starting to look a little bit like the roof of a house now, to be honest. It's starting to keep me warm. But
just in time for the sun as well. I'm not sure that's worked out too well, has it?
Exactly. We're doing a hair update today anyway because it's a good day. We are recording the day after Liverpool last played, and it's the first time Liverpool have experienced a win in the Premier League in exactly a month, which is strange for the current times, strange for the current Liverpool team. So we're going to talk about what happened at Sheffield United. We're going to preview this week's big game against Chelsea, massive game, and then we've got Fulham on the weekend. So that's on the agenda for today. We will get straight into it. So in terms of Sheffield United, Dave, I don't know about you, but it was a little bit different to what I expected. I thought it would be a lot tighter than it actually was.
Yeah, it's one of them, isn't it? Where 2-0 looks like an easy enough win, but not particularly dominant. But if we look at the underlying numbers, which I'm sure you'll probably reel off very shortly, it was really dominant. I think on the other day, maybe with better finishing / a less of a standout performance from Ramsdale in goal. I think that could have been a 4 or 5-0. I thought Liverpool were really comfortable, creating some good stuff. I think obviously they made some subtle adjustments, didn't they, to how they played, and I think that worked quite well. But yeah, it's one of them, is that you would have been so disappointed and concerned if you wouldn't have won this game, I think. But they did, and they done so in an impressive manner. So you can't really complain, can you? I think it's a good away win, and just what the doctor ordered, really, given the recent struggles that Liverpool have had.
Yeah, I mean, coming up against this team, I know the bottom of the league, clearly having a bad time, but I still expected a very tight game. I expected, narrow pitch, back five, difficult to progress through the thirds, particularly difficult to penetrate the box. And it just wasn't. I think from the off, really, Liverpool had the better run of the play throughout. Consistently, every now and then, generated decent opportunities against Sheffield United. I've just checked the shot map now for the first time, actually, Dave. And I don't know if you want to have a quick look on understats at it, but it's ideal. It's absolutely what you want. Most of Liverpool's shots, with the exception of maybe 2, are outside the box. And that's from a total of, according to understat, Liverpool had 16 shots, only 2 outside the box. 2 of them, in fact, no, 3 of them were inside the 6-yard box. Obviously, Salah's, which was saved, and a Curtis Jones effort, which was saved, apparently. Oh, yeah, I remember that one, yeah. But Liverpool just generally had a really dominant game, I thought, and not just a dominant game whereby they see all of the ball, but as I'm getting to, obviously, a crucially dominant game in terms of generating real attacking openings that are likely to be scored, while restricting the opposition to the opposite at the opposite end.
Yeah. I think Liverpool have said, you touched on Salah's shot there, but Liverpool have real issues, I think, creating not only clear-cut chances, but chances in that 6-yard area, where it's a lot easier to convert, and I think creating shots in the 6-yard box is representative of good chances. I know that seems really basic to say, and there's a lot more moving parts than that. But when you're looking at things like shot maps, after the game, I think if there's chances being created in that area, then you could assume even without watching the game that the good chances of being created. And I think if you were to look over Liverpool's shot maps across the past few weeks, a lot of the season actually, I remember a statistic doing the rounds maybe a week or two ago that Salah hadn't had many, if any, shots inside the 6-yard box this season, which I thought was a bit, it was a bit of a surprise. Does that ring a bell to you? Does it, Josh?
To be honest, mate, I was just looking at that now.
Oh yeah,
because it did ring a bell in my head when I said that to you, and I'm just checking now. And all season in the Premier League, Salah has taken 3 shots inside the 6-yard box. 2 came against Sheffield United last night, and the other one came a week ago against Everton in Merseyside derby.
I can't remember where they'd seen it from or whether I'd even come across it myself. As I said, it was a couple of weeks ago now, but I remember being quite taken back by that and thinking that was quite representative of, a little bit from a Liverpool point of view, quite disappointing. So for Liverpool to be creating 2, actually 3 inside the 6-yard boxes, in itself a story, and gives you an indication of how much better they were in terms of breaking Sheffield United down. And I agree, bottom of the league, and I said you'd be really disappointed if you didn't beat them. There'd be more questions, but you touched on it that they're still not a pushover. We said on the pre-show last week that they've probably been a little bit unlucky to be on par with that kind of derby team of the late noughties points wise. I think they have been a little bit unlucky with like personal errors and things, and so it wasn't going to be a walk in the park, but Liverpool did make it look like that and much improved performance to go with the win.
Yeah, I mean it's thankfully captured in the numbers, which hasn't really been the case lately for Liverpool. Liverpool have established dominance lately, but not necessarily when it comes to specifically the expected goals, because we've been giving away the odd clear-cut opening that registers as a big shot, and as a result, the XG of the opposition takes a bit of a boost. But in this game, the expected goals, Liverpool posted 2.7, and Sheffield United posted just 0.6. So that's really, a 3-0 win, really. I must admit I was a bit on edge in the first half when Liverpool yet again hadn't converted. And, we were up against Aaron Ramsdale, who I actually checked at half-time for what he was like for the season. So far this season, he had underperformed when I checked by about 2.6 goals this season, which essentially means that, that's according to post-shot expected goals. So that essentially means that if they had a bang-average goalkeeper between the sticks, they'd have conceded roughly 2.6 goals fewer than they actually have, which doesn't seem like much. But in comparison to the rest of the league and the way those numbers tend to work, it's a fair amount. I thought that the first half, to be honest, I thought was a mixture of him making good saves, but Liverpool also not really finishing to a high level in terms of, that age-old cliche of finding the corners sort of thing.
Yeah. It's I feel like there's been a lot of debates that I've actively avoided getting involved in about finishing over the last few weeks in the kind of Twitter world and the Twitter analytics world, and it feels like a few influential voices have kind of made out that finishing isn't really an art, and it's a lot of kind of luck, and players go through hot and cold streaks. That latter point I agree with, but I do definitely think that finishing is something that some players are better than others are. And we talk about Firmino, who's historically, based on his underlying numbers, being quite an average finisher. He's, in fact, we may talk about this last week, Josh, saying there's a bit of a cold spell for him and Mane, but yeah, that chance that he had about on the half-hour mark, was it? Oh no, I think it was a lot earlier actually, where he runs through in on goal, and Ramsdale does make a good save, but I think if you watch it back, where he's kind of put it, he's basically just put it above the keeper in a position where he can just push his arm out and obviously pull off that save. And you just touched on corners there, putting it in the corners. that's what I think you're going to see a little bit more of, and for that reason, it's why I said that it was not only a good performance that kept it the scoreline this from the keeper, but I also think there was just a little bit of too much loose finishing and just not being accurate enough, frankly.
I mean, what do you actually make on the whole Firmino thing? I mean, we haven't touched on it that much of late, but he's certainly, I think the criticism has certainly taken a little bit of a boost lately. I think he was always going to be that player anyway. He was always going to be the player who, if the attack isn't working, people will always revert back to we need a striker, we need a traditional number 9. That's always going to be the case. It always was the case. But I do think there's an element of truth now in the decline sort of happening a little bit in terms of his all-round game and that sort of stuff, and particularly his finishing, like you mentioned there, that it might be a bit of a cold spell for him. I'm actually just inclined to think he's at best an average finisher. He's certainly not above average. I think he's underperformed now for about 2 seasons. I'll double check that in a sec. But what's your general take on Firmino?
Yeah, I mean that's basically it. I think even historically, if you look at the numbers, which maybe you haven't a look now, I think from what I've seen, he does look to be on the whole a fairly average finisher, which you can kind of account for because of what he brought to other aspects of the game, specifically his role kind of in the team over the past 3 years or so. But it underperforms is so much more noticeable when you're already an average player. Like I feel like if Salah went from overperforming to performing at an average level, it wouldn't feel that extreme, because he'd still probably be converting the chances you'd expect. Whereas it does feel like Firmino's kind of really wasteful of things you just expect the top forward in a Liverpool side to score. And this isn't a kind of reactionary response, I think, because I'm sure, regular listeners can probably go back to various episodes over the last 18 months where we've been quite supportive of Firmino because we looked at it from the bigger picture. He still scores biggish goals and he still brings a lot to the team. But we're now looking at, certainly this season and the last, maybe even being the season before, where there is a notable underperformance where he's just not converting at a rate you'd expect from a Liverpool forward. And I think there's only so many times you can make excuses now. And not just that, by the way, we're not just looking at numbers. I think watching the game, you see these chances yourself. And, we know that there can be a little bit of bias in your own kind of cognitive analysis when you're watching a game. I understand that. But when you're seeing things and thinking he probably should convert that, and then the underlying numbers are reaffirming that theory, then the chances are you're probably close to being right.
I mean, over the course of the past 3 seasons, he has actually underperformed each season. So this season, this is excluding penalties, even though he's only taken 2 in the past 4 seasons. But excluding penalties, this season, he's underperformed by 4.5 goals. Last season, underperformed by 4.5 goals. Season before, underperformed by 1.5. And the season before, overperformed by 3.7. So it depends how you're looking at that, really. But I think specifically over the course of the past 3 seasons, he's underperformed there by about 10 goals. And that's that. An average finisher scores 10 goals more than Firmino over the course of that 3-season period, and that's Premier League only, by the way. But I just think that for me, along with clearly what we're witnessing with our eyes, is enough for me to suggest that he probably is not the greatest finisher. It's quite obvious, I think. But despite that, when it's obviously less of a problem when Liverpool find other ways to find the net. And one of the players who found the net, player who opened the scoring, I thought was particularly good on the day. I've just wrote about him, tweeted about him this morning, and there'll be a piece going up on him today, I think, on the Echo from myself on him. Curtis Jones, Dave, we've mentioned him in the past on this podcast, but I think he's coming into his own, and he's establishing himself now to the extent that Naby Keita's returned fitness, James Milner's returned fitness, Fabinho is now in the background lurking. And you could argue Jones doesn't come out.
No, not for me. I was a little bit surprised. A month or two ago, it felt like he was getting written off a little bit in parts. Obviously, I haven't got my finger on the pulse with Liverpool fans as many as others, but no, I've for a long time thought he looks a really good player, and he looks like someone who comes in and really impacts the team positively when he's on the pitch. I guess on Sunday you'd say he was kind of that penetrator from the middle that I think Liverpool can sometimes lack from midfield, pushing up into good advanced areas. Worked really well, and obviously scored a really good goal when we've just been harping on about a lack of clinical edge and being a little bit wasteful in front of goal, and then he scores a really good one, which is what you need in those moments, I think. So yeah, he's doing really well. Player I really like, and yeah, he's gone beyond kind of being this play that you're rooting for because he's homegrown, he's young, and he's come through the academy, and now you start taking on his credentials a little bit more serious as well. A player who warrants being in the side because of what he brings to the team, and certainly on last night's game. Obviously, we're recording on Monday. Last night's game against Sheffield United, I thought he was one of the best performers.
I must admit, I am excited by him. I think he's a big talent. He's got a lot of things on his side, a lot of things that you want from a midfielder in the modern game, but specifically a Klopp type midfielder. Very, very physical. I think he's over 6 foot, but he's also clearly very mobile, very aggressive, proactive, dynamic on the ball and stuff. He's kind of got a bit of, I think, Gerrard about him in that way. I think it's, do you know what? I think generally this is probably, a bit difficult to understand for some, but I think it's kind of a Liverpool scout trait, personally. If you look at the players that have came out of Liverpool, Jamie Carragher, Wayne Rooney, Steven Gerrard, even the likes of a bit lower down, players like Joey Barton and players like that. Players from Liverpool, they do tend to be kind of just a bit intuitive, a bit more dynamic than, let's say, your average player. And I think Jones has got that about him. I think he seems to be inclined. Trent is another one. I think there's been plenty of times where Trent has kind of grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck, and he's been doing that a bit more lately. And I think Jones, in particular, has been doing that a little bit, and he's clearly inclined to carry the ball and stuff. And I think you felt his impact last night. You felt his influence on the game.
Yeah, I agree with that point. I do think there's I'm really conscious of not sounding too biased to the city that we're from here, because although obviously it's a Liverpool podcast, I think there's people from all over listening. I don't want to give the wrong impression, but there is certainly, and growing up in this city playing football, it's really ultra competitive, isn't it? The games you have, and it is very kind of you do a lot. You don't like to lose. You impact every part of the game you can. It's not really you kind of come through and you just, well, this is the position I play, or this is what I'm good at. You do kind of, and I think there's even at amateur level, try and fill in so many different ways. And I think Jones does capture that. And there is loads of examples of players coming through from Liverpool who's just got that. Maybe not the same skill set, because I think Jones is right up there. So is the likes of Gerrards and Rooney's and stuff. But maybe just it's a mindset thing. And I think if you look at a lot of players who've kind of grown up and come through the academies in this city, they do have that kind of extra edge to the game a little bit. I think that's an accurate observation. If you really look into it, you'll probably see what we mean.
Yeah, I just think he just excites me as a player. I think what he could become. He's obviously only 20 years old, academy graduate, clearly quite versatile. And to be honest, I referenced Keita before. He reminds me a little bit of Keita. Some of the skills attached to his game. Like one of the visits that I tweeted this morning was his tendency to carry the ball. He's inclined to get on the ball and basically move his team up the field, which sounds very basic, but it's not that much of a common trait.
No, it's not.
I actually got up the top 25 for central midfielders in the league this season. Minimum 1,000 minutes played. And Jones currently ranks second for progressive carries per 90. For perspective, that is a carry that moves the ball towards the opponent's goal by at least 5 yards, or any carry into the penalty box, excluding carries from the defending 40% of the pitch. As I said, Jones ranks second, one behind Bernardo Silva, who you could argue isn't really a central midfielder. I mean, he's played 900 of his minutes this season as a centre midfielder. I think he's played in total about 1,400 or so. So he has been playing in centre midfield this season. In third place, there's Mateo Kovacic, and then Dani Ceballos, and then Kevin De Bruyne. So, it's not to suggest that Jones is as good as those players, but when it comes to carrying the ball, he's obviously just as inclined to do it as those players, if not more inclined. And I think when it comes to, you mentioned the game plan there, mixing it up, I think when it comes to the game plan that Liverpool employed, Jones was quite an integral part of it, specifically as Liverpool moved up the field. We seemed to form some sort of like a front five, really. Hence, we were able to advance in their final third quite frequently, but that front five obviously involved Salah, Firmino, Mane, but then it also involved Robertson and Jones, and then providing a bit more protection behind was Trent, Thiago and Wijnaldum. But I thought it worked really nicely. I'm not sure if we'll see it moving forward, considering it felt like a bit of a deliberate ploy for a defensive back five system. But Jones was quite integral to it, and I like the way it worked.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it worked really well, and just mentioned it there, Trent. He had a really good game. I thought it was dead interesting that I had a look at this before. He had from what I could see, his most touches in the defensive third for the whole season. But it did kind of feel like he was playing a more deeper role with it, all the play ahead of him. And people kind of always talking about him as a midfield option. Well, you feel like you got a glimpse into it in the game on Sunday. And I think it suited him really well. Kind of dictating things a little bit from deeper, playing almost like, as you said, like a midfield three behind that five, but still, having that option to make some overlapping runs as and when the opportunities presented themselves. So yeah, I thought it worked really well, and did say last week that Sheffield United could have been a really good, not trial game, because that seems really disrespectful to them. Ultimately, it's still a Premier League game and a tough one, but almost as good as you'll get in terms of trying something a little bit new in this division. Maybe this was an example of it, and you'd say it works, and now there's another option for Klopp going into similar games in the future, which combats that point we were saying last week, where things sometimes have felt a little bit too predictable.
Yeah, I mean, just before we move on to Chelsea, I just want to give a shout towards Trent, because I thought, again, last night I thought he was great. I think lately he's been a lot better. Maybe he hasn't got the goals or the assists yet to go with them, but I think his performances have been a lot more impactful, really. I think he's had a lot more of a say on proceedings, which bodes well moving forward for the final stretch. And just before we touch on Chelsea, Dave, any general thoughts on the Phillips-Kabak partnership, and whether you'd keep it moving forward, how it worked?
I haven't got much choice. It's hands are tied a little bit. Yeah, no, look, it seemed okay. I think it's integral now that Liverpool get a partnership in place. Whether you consider as individuals the two of the best is up for debate. Because there's obviously Ben Davies sitting there waiting in the wings, but I think it's just integral that after so much chopping and changing so far this season, that there's a partnership in place. And on paper, yeah, that might not be a title win, the centre back pairing, but you could probably make a case for saying, with the potential they have, it could easily be like a top 8, for example, being conservative, top 8 partnership, and the class that Liverpool have got in other areas of the pitch. You may lose 1 or 2 goals as a result of them, but it should do a fairly steady job like it did on Sunday.
Yeah, I think it's one of them that you need to kind of accept, I think, I think although Fabinho's come back, there's a temptation there to switch it back again and to put Fabinho alongside, say, Kabak maybe. But I think if Klopp's been searching for this consistency, I mentioned this last week, Klopp's been searching for a consistent back four, and he's been doing it through using midfielders and players like that. But I think if he's going to establish that before the end of the season, he needs to kind of use two centre-backs. I thought it was amazing, by the way. I saw the stat that said it's the first time in the Premier League that Liverpool have played with two actual centre-backs since November, which is quite incredible, really. But I think moving forward, I think I'd stick with Phillips and Kabak, although there's clear limitations there. I think, it's worth just sticking with them because any other consistency clearly isn't happening. Other players need to be brought back more slowly. Phillips hasn't been injured all season. Kabak hasn't. So I think that it's worth just keeping him in the team, really, moving forward.
Yeah.
Having said that, Thursday's test will be a lot trickier for them to navigate compared to Sheffield United. So, general thoughts, Dave, on the impact of Thomas Tuchel?
It's sort of, make sure I say me WhatsApp off there. It's tough because the results have been good. I still think he's undefeated. I think there's a clear philosophy in that they're dominating the ball. I think they're restricting teams to very few chances. United are a dangerous team in that game on Sunday. They didn't really, they didn't really concede too many high quality chances. That being said, it feels like those two first thirds, they're doing okay. Defensive third, middle third, but it just isn't really clicking so far up top. No one's really, we've talked about hot and cold before. There's no one really running hot from an attacking point of view for them. There's no real danger men, I'd say, at present. And I think it shows that they haven't quite got, as a result, that fluidity up front, and they're not really creating that many chances themselves. So it's mostly good, I guess, but not perfect either, if that makes sense.
I think from my perspective, I've actually been really impressed. I think, I do like him. I do like listening to him, especially. I think he gives really insightful answers, got a really interesting perspective on the game. And I think specifically the way in which Chelsea have established control so quickly has been really, really impressive. Having said that, there's obviously a massive caveat attached to that, in that the opponents that they've faced have all generally been of a similar mould, really. They've all kind of allowed Chelsea to have that control without really wanting to wrestle it from them. Like Wolves, then Burnley, then Spurs, then Sheffield United, then Barnsley, then Newcastle United, and then maybe a little bit more on Southampton's side. But they were quite a few games without a win. And then Atletico Madrid, and then more recently Man United, which is a little bit different. But most of those teams will present a similar challenge to Chelsea in terms of Chelsea just having to break down a block while restricting counter-attacks from materialising. Really, it's kind of been the same thing every week. I think the way in which they've approached that, as I said, has been really, really good. But you touched on it there. I think in attack, they're still finding the feet. I think they're still finding a way of working in attack. Still haven't really clicked. Obviously, have you been surprised a little bit at just how much faith he's put in Hudson-Odoi so early on?
A little bit, but I think he's obviously got a specific profile that he wants in those wing-back positions, because obviously he was using Alonso a fair bit as well, wasn't he? It was only Chilwell coming against United. And maybe he's just seen Hudson-Odoi as, someone who's an attacker by trade, really. And he wants him there. And then Alonso's not great without the ball, but he is again, another fairly decent attacker. So maybe that's where it stems from. To answer your original question, yeah, I am a little bit surprised, and I thought maybe things were going to turn sour last week when he called them out, didn't he? I think he pulled them off against Southampton. But then he's played, I think, the next two games. So, obviously there isn't a big issue there. So, Yeah, I am a little bit surprised, but it's a little bit of a strange one attacking wise. If you asked me who's their most dangerous attacker at the moment, I couldn't really tell you,
Yeah,
considering all the players they've got.
Yeah, yeah. I must admit, I like his usage of him as a wing back. I think it's, I've spoke plenty of times, maybe not so much on this podcast, maybe more on the Analysing Everton podcast, about players who are clearly quite attacking by nature, but they don't offer the output, the goals and the assists, which is what you need from a player who's going to take up a forward role, a position in the final third. You need that output. And I think Hudson-Odoi is quite clearly very attacking. But in terms of finding the net, he's not that inclined. Assists, a little bit more inclined, yeah. But I don't know. I think bringing him back a little bit into a wing-back role, that allows you to bring in another attacker ahead of him who's maybe got that output to his game. And it allows Hudson-Odoi to focus a bit more on, dribbling, 1v1s, crossing, finding the penalty box with passes. And he's good at all those things. So I actually like his usage of him. I think Tuchel's, his tactical understanding of the game, he clearly understands how to use Kante, for example. Kante's been a topic of debate for a few years, and I think Tuchel's description of him was really accurate. Same with Timo Werner. So I think he's a really shrewd tactical coach, to be honest. And I thought a few seasons ago, Liverpool faced his PSG team, came to Anfield in the Champions League group stages, and his defensive approach was just really interesting, because he quite clearly analysed Liverpool and recognised that Liverpool's main strength was a fight, really, in the middle of the pitch, second balls and all that sort of stuff. And when PSG came to Anfield, anytime the ball was kind of lost by a PSG player, they'd just retreat into a block. There was no kind of engaging, no battle, nothing like that, because Tuchel was well aware that they would probably lose. I mean, they did end up losing anyway, 3-2. But I thought that ability to just adjust your tactics and just kind of retreat into a block rather than engaging, I thought was really clever at the time. And it'll be interesting to see what he does when he faces this Liverpool team on the weekend. On Thursday.
Yeah, I don't actually expect that many changes. But maybe I'm being a little bit naive with that. Maybe he will adjust it. I don't know. It is, as you've just used the word, interesting. I think it is an interesting matchup. It's a really big game as well. It's kind of a game where both teams know that they need. Would you say win? Probably, yeah. Probably need a win, don't they? Liverpool do. I think Chelsea do as well. Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting one, and it should be good for the neutral at least.
Yeah, I think just a bit more on Chelsea's control that I mentioned earlier on. Their ability to control their opponents has been, for me, without doubt, the most impressive thing that Tuchel's established so early on. So if you look at the expected goals that they've faced, the expected goals that they've allowed on the defensive side. So against Wolves posted 0.4. Then Burnley posted 0.2. Spurs posted 0.3. Sheffield United 0.4. Newcastle United 0.7. Southampton 0.5. Atletico Madrid 0.5. Manchester United 0.5. That's impressive. They're impressive numbers, them, Dave.
Yeah. I touched on it. Didn't I, at the start of the segment? It's that they've done a really good job of restricting, shots. Because they've obviously haven't been conceding a lot of goals, but that doesn't always, tell the full picture, as we know. And we'll probably touch on that with Fulham in a bit. But they have been conceding a lot of big chances. And I think it does come to that element of control. And I think they have controlled the first 2/3 really well. I think they're looking after the ball really well. I noticed that against United a few times. I think it's all very precise, and there's not, because it is kind of possession orientated. They're happy to go backwards when possession's turned over. I think Kovacic is doing really well for them in the middle. He's a player I like anyway, as you know, because we talk about him on here. And And the testament to how good they've been is what you just reeled off there. The underlying defensive numbers. They're not a team who concede a lot of big chances, which is an interesting kind of subplot when you think that we just spent 10 minutes at the start of the show talking about a lack of maybe a clinical edge in front of goal from a Liverpool perspective.
Yeah, I mean, they're actually yet to face over 1 XG in any game so far on the Tuchel. But, weirdly, despite that, I feel strangely encouraged from a Liverpool perspective when it comes to Liverpool's attack for this game. I feel more, maybe not excited. Excited is not the word, maybe, but I'm looking forward to this one in an attacking sense more so than I was the Sheffield United game. Strangely, I think maybe it's because Chelsea's tendency to get on the ball and build from the back. Obviously, they're still learning the ropes there, even though they've taken to it quite comfortably so far. But I think it probably stems from the fact that Liverpool are probably going to get some opportunities in transition in this game, and that hasn't really been the case throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's still not. It is strange because in those moments you're gonna have people like they're relying on players like Aspilicueta, for example, aren't they, still in defence, and I feel like that is a nice little matchup from Mane versus Aspilicueta point of view, and his support would be Hudson-Odoi, who've just been talking about, who's obviously really good going forward, but maybe not great on the other side of it. So it is. I agree. I'm weirdly, if you. While still not doing predictions as such now, if I was put on the spot, I would be backing Liverpool on this one. I'm not really sure why, because as I said, there's things to like about Chelsea. But maybe it just comes down to they're just not creating it themselves. I appreciate that they're hard to score against, and they're not giving up big chances, but they're also not creating many themselves. So I think, who's maybe going to be more dangerous in those transition periods that you just touched on there. And I think Liverpool are definitely better suited to create chances when in these, quick moments where the ball's turned over, then maybe a little bit out of shape.
Yeah. I mean, Alisson should be back, which is a big positive. The negative on that side compared to the Manchester United game, Timo Werner should be back. I know that probably a lot of supporters won't be scared of him given the season that he's had in front of the goal and stuff, but specifically when you're playing a high defensive line without quick centre backs, he's probably going to be a problem. And I think
just on that, what I will say is, because I've seen him a fair bit, yeah, he's not scoring, and it's been well publicised that he just hasn't scored the goals he's expecting to, but he's not actually playing that bad at all. He does contribute, and I think his kind of contributions away from goals direct actually quite good, they're up there, and he does seem to bring a lot to the attack. So I think those reservations that you're alluding to there, I think there is reasons for it, because he is someone who can kind of, he might not be scoring 2 or 3 goals every week, but he is certainly bringing something to the attack.
Yeah, I think no matter what, even when he's out of form, he's a difficult player to defend against, just because of his qualities. He's incredibly quick off the mark. Reminds me a little bit of Sterling in that regard. And, I think he's won a fair few penalties already, and I don't think that's anything to do with diving. It's just because he's a difficult player to defend against, difficult player to manage. And I think, to be honest, I think sometimes he plays with his shell. I think he could have even more of an impact on the game if he kind of almost recognised how good he actually was, because I think he's got really valuable qualities, and he's a top player, but sometimes I think he goes safe with a pass maybe rather than taking on his direct opponents, and I think he can be a lot better than he actually is. I think he's quite far from his potential ceiling, I think, Timo Werner. But I thought it was interesting that, once getting asked about him ahead of the Manchester United game, Tuchel directly referenced the Liverpool game coming up as one of the reasons why he was benched, which doesn't really bode well for Liverpool's defence. And I think he could be a tricky player to manage in behind. I wouldn't be surprised if Tuchel played him through the middle, to be honest, given Liverpool's 2 centre backs. But before we move on to Fulham, I'll let you get to that preview, Dave, that you just mentioned. Prediction.
Prediction. Yeah, really, as I said, I think I'm just backing Liverpool on this one. I don't know why, and this is really unfair, and this is not anything kind of based on analysis, but there's still a place for gut feelings. I can just kind of see a Leicester scenario playing out, from the game early in the year, where it's just Liverpool just play really well. So I'm going to go 2-0 Liverpool.
Okay, that's nice. I think I'm going to go a Liverpool win. I really, really like Chelsea. I like Everton. I like a lot about what I'm seeing. But the attack does seem a little bit still learning the ropes. It's obviously at Anfield, which should be a positive. And I think Liverpool have a number of attacking weapons now available. Naby Keita is obviously available to play. Curtis Jones is in a bit of form, offering a bit of threat from midfield. And hopefully Diego Jota will be on the bench. So, yeah, I think I'm going to go 2-1 Liverpool, I think. Really important game, and hopefully it'll kickstart a positive end to the campaign, because we really need Champions League football. And just finally, touch on Fulham, who I must admit, I don't think I've seen any Premier League team, certainly newly promoted team, go from so bad to competitive in the same half season. Fair play, Scott Parker.
Yeah. I was going to say they've low key massively improved. One defeat it is in 8 league matches. They've hardly conceded goals. It's the 5th fewest since the turn of the year. They've conceded about, I think it's 9. Although I did have look into it, and in terms of XG against, they're quite up there. They're one of the sides up there in that period. I think they conceded. Yeah, they're about 14 plus in XG against. So, they've probably benefited a little bit by maybe some good fortune or some good displays from the keeper. The usual things that can impact that. But just despite that, the underlying numbers are saying they've improved in other areas. And I watched them against Everton a few weeks ago. And although I thought Everton were really below par on the day, I thought they played really well. Some really good football, and they've actually got some. When you look at their team now, there's some really good players. They look an exciting team. They've got Anguissa, who we've talked about on here. Lookman, Loftus-Cheek. They brought in Marja, didn't they? Is it? Oh, Marja, yeah, in January window. They got Tete, who I thought could have been played at higher for the bigger club. When they brought him in the summer, they got some really good players.
Yeah, they have. They've got nice fullbacks. I think Ola Aina is maybe how you say it. Used to be at Chelsea. Might even be on loan, I'm not sure. But he's a difficult player to deal with. I think he actually went off injured on the weekend. Andy Robertson as well. Robinson, good player. Obviously, I've mentioned Joe Bryan on this podcast plenty of times. I think he's coming towards the end now, maybe at Fulham. But I think he was, a good player and stuff. And obviously, you've just mentioned Anguissa there, and the quite quick forwards, tricky forwards that they've got in attack. You mentioned there since Christmas. I've just got it up then. So, since the 1st of January, they've played 10 times. Most teams have played 10 times. Fulham have played 11, 12 points since then, which places them about 13th. And in defence, they've overperformed by about 5 or 6 goals. But in attack, they've underperformed by about 3 to 4 goals. So I think it kind of sums up how they've transformed a little bit. They've certainly transformed on the defensive side. I think Areola's had a good season, overperforming and stuff like that. Anderson in the centre-back was linked with Man United a few years ago. I remember writing about him at the time for the MEN. Tosin as well, I think it looked really good. I think they were in from Manchester City. Looked really relaxed, really calm on the ball, a bit of a leader and stuff. And then up front, as I said, they've got quick forwards, but one issue is being putting the ball in the back of the net. And then, to address that, I suppose, they signed Josh Maja. So I've been really impressed with how they've turned things around, and they deserve credit for it. And I actually hope they stay up. I actually hope
Yeah, so do I.
Newcastle go down ahead of them, to be honest. Not against Newcastle fans, great club and stuff, but the way Newcastle have been run as a club for a few years, just depressing, especially from a performance perspective, Dave. We have to look into the numbers and stuff.
Yeah,
it's great.
They've been rubbish for years. Well, the last couple of years, they don't really. I think they should have went down last year, to be honest, but they didn't, and they look like they were can't hold on again. But we can only look at it from a neutral point of view, and I'd much rather watch Fulham than watch a Newcastle game. You know what you're going to get with Newcastle. It's miserable. With Fulham, I think there's a little bit of excitement in there. So yeah, I agree. I hope obviously no Liverpool fans will be open to get points this weekend, but I hope they pick up a good few between now and the end of the year and stay up.
Yeah, obviously still competing. They're still actually in the relegation zone. And they seem to draw an awful lot of games. They draw a lot of games, and that's because of they're able to keep it relatively tight at one end, but then at the other end, not so much. They've actually drawn, not so much in terms of putting the ball in the net. They've actually drawn 11 games, which is the joint most alongside Brighton, which says everything. I suppose we know all about Brighton, don't we? So it's going to be an interesting game. I think that in a way, they're a little bit of a mini version of Liverpool at the moment in terms of playing good football, keeping things relatively tight at the defensive side, while allowing the odd little big moments, I suppose. And then up front, generally being quite good, but not putting the ball in the back of the net. So, and obviously they performed really well against Liverpool early in the season. I think Liverpool managed to get a 1-1 that day, but for the first half an hour, we got outplayed really by Fulham, to be honest.
I remember it, yeah.
Yeah, so predictions ahead of this one, Dave. I don't think it's going to be as easy as the table suggests.
No, not a tough game. But I'm following on from an expected win against Chelsea. So I've got to back Liverpool again. But I actually fancy Fulham to score. Don't know why, I just do. I think, as I said, that I know you've touched on the underperformance, but I still think they've got some good attackers up there. Be a problem for any defence, especially a makeshift one. So I'm going to go 2-1 Liverpool.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree too much with that. I think it's going to be tight. I don't think it's going to be too much of an enjoyable game. Could be wrong. I mean, Fulham are inclined to play football, and that does tend to offer opportunities for Liverpool. Hopefully, we don't give them an early lead this time like we did last time, and we can maybe pick them off one score in the opening goal. But I think I'm going to say 2-0. As I said, I think Fulham are really good, but hopefully Liverpool are now starting to run a form with a few additional attacking options now in Naby Keita and Diogo Jota, Curtis Jones coming into form and things. So hopefully Liverpool can now start establishing a degree of consistency, and it starts with Sheffield United. Hopefully it can continue against Chelsea and Fulham. And we'll be back next week to talk about what lies ahead. So Dave, thanks for joining us, mate.
Yeah, thank you, mate. Cheers, everyone.
And we'll be back next week. Cheers.